Good morning. We've got a short time frame, so let's try to go ahead and get started. I'm glad to have a quorum, and I'll call the meeting of the Senate Insurance and Labor Committee to order. We've got an agenda here before us. First up is House Bill 994, which we've already heard, and we're gonna vote on that. There is a committee substitute that I'll explain. Next is House Bill 451, it's a hearing only, and lastly, House Bill 924, hearing only. We're working on getting a sign-up sheet for the second two bills. Is it out there? So we'll have a sign-up sheet shortly. We're gonna have to limit the time because we only have this room for a set amount of time, but, all right. Any questions before I get started? Here on House Bill 994, we've got a Senate Committee Sub LC 460905S. I'll remind you, this is the bill related to marinas or boat livery, marinas that rent boats, and it's called boat livery. Under current Georgia law, the marina has vicarious liability for negligent acts of the boat operator. This will change that and put us in line with Florida and South Carolina and other states that have addressed this. So under certain circumstances, if the marina carries liability insurance, they will be shielded from this vicarious liability of negligent operation of the boat by the person that rented the boat. The only change that we make with this committee substitute is on line 50 and 51 on page 3. The bill that we heard last week required liability limits for the marina of $250,000 per person per occurrence and not less than $1 million in aggregate. And this is increasing that to $500,000 per occurrence and $1 million aggregate. I think we may have an error on that. Stand by. Okay, so I just want to be sure the language was what we needed, and we think it is. So on line 50 and 51, we're raising the required liability limit on the liability policy for the marina from 250,000 per person per occurrence, and not less than $1 million in the aggregate, to not less than 500,000 in the aggregate per occurrence. Now we're going to not less than 500,000 per person per occurrence, and not less than $1 million in the aggregate per occurrence. In my experience with garage policies and general liability policies, usually the limits are like 300, 600, or you don't really see 250, 500 very often. And I'm also told that the Corps Engineer lakes and maybe the Georgia Power lakes require the 500,000 anyhow. So I don't think this is going to increase the cost of the insurance significantly at all. And I've talked to the interested parties that were working with the marinas on this, and they're comfortable with this language, and I'm told this is what the limits that Florida and South Carolina have on their law. So that's the only change. We again already had a hearing on this. Be happy to entertain any questions, but we need to move this out if we can.
Just one question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if the 501 million that's what we're going with, what's on the line?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time.
All right, I'll entertain.
Oh, you gotta go.
Okay, yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, as I read this, normally, when you go get a car, and you don't have insurance, they include, you pay the insurance for a rental car. They don't do the same thing with, folks who rent boats.
What the testimony we heard last week, Senator Lucas, is there's not a market for spot insurance for renting a boat like there is a market for spot insurance to rent a car. It's not available currently in the insurance world. Was talk that some people are looking at that, and they may be able to come up with something, but it's not available currently, is the testimony we heard.
So if I rent a boat from you, and I make it a party, drinking liquor and stuff, and I fool around and hit somebody out there on the lake, the individual is responsible for taking care of the other folks.
Yes, sir.
But I rent the boat from you, and
Yeah.
you carry general liability.
Yes, sir.
So I mean, that means I can't file an action against you as the renter of the vessel.
Under current law, the way it was presented to us is currently the boat marinas that are renting boats are being sued for that kind of situation that you described. So they are being sued for vicarious liability, even though it's really no fault of their own. And they are finding they're unable to even buy insurance currently because of that exposure. This is going to give some limited protection for the marina, and we had a pretty long testimony went through all the things the marina has to do. They have to not rent to anybody under 16. They have to have a training session on how to operate the boat safely. They can't rent to anybody that's obviously intoxicated, et cetera, et cetera. If they meet all of those requirements and carry GL or liability insurance, then they would have some protection from vicarious liability. You can't prevent anybody from bringing a suit. So in your case that you are describing, they still, guess could sue the marina. But this would give the marina some defense and protection if this bill were to be passed. If the marina did everything right, the boat was in safe operating condition, and it was solely because of the negligence of the operator, then the marina would have a defense and prevail, I would think, in that lawsuit if we pass this. But part of the trade-off is the marinas are now going to have to carry insurance if they want to have that protection. Any other questions? So I have a motion, do pass LC 46095S. Do I have a second? Got a second from Senator Robertson. Further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, 6 in favor. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And Senator Brass is going to carry this bill.
Oh, reconsideration?
Can we reconsider? That changes this.
Okay. Next up, Representative Seaball, House Bill 451. Representative Seaball, I'm gonna give you all eight minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senators, for the opportunity to present House Bill 451, working off LC 5204966S.
Yes, sir, that's what we have.
All right. And if I may, before I get into what the bill does, I'd like to discuss why this bill is needed and what the problem is that we're trying to solve. According to the CDC, law enforcement officers, firefighters, and EMTs are more likely to die by suicide than in line of duty deaths. And 24% of public safety telecommunicators or 911 operators have symptoms of PTSD within their first year of employment. The statistics show that untreated PTSD is leading to death by suicide. And if not suicide, these professionals are resigning from their first responder work. We all know we have a serious workforce shortage issue in public safety already, and PTSD is causing a lot of these professionals to resign. PTSD is treatable, and we can help these professionals and keep them working in the profession they love if we just intervene early and get them the counseling and treatment that they need. To do that, we need to break the stigma that asking for help will cause them to lose their job and that it's okay to ask for help. We need to provide a way to get help in a confidential manner without placing an undue financial burden on their families. And that is what we've attempted to do in House Bill 451. So what this bill does is requires local and state governments to provide a supplemental insurance benefit for their first responders to cover expenses should they be diagnosed with PTSD resulting from exposure to a line of duty traumatic event. The benefit provides a once per lifetime financial safety net to encourage first responders having mental health issues to seek counseling without the fear of losing their job or placing undue financial stress on their families. It is designed to assist with uninsured costs associated with the treatment and recovery of PTSD. And I know you have a policy statement that outlines the benefits specifically, but just in summary, it includes a cash benefit of $3,000 payable by the insurer to the first responder upon receiving a diagnosis of PTSD. And that diagnosis takes 30 days to get a PTSD diagnosis. The cash benefit is there to assist with covering any out-of-pocket expenses not covered by the health benefit during the first 90 days. An example of the expenses during the first 90 days might include insurance deductibles, co-pays, out-of-network cost, medications, etc. After 90 days, if it is determined that they cannot return to work because of their diagnosis, a supplemental disability income benefit For up to 3 years, will begin to cover will begin to cover their annual salary, but their monthly benefit would not exceed $5,000 per month, and that would be paid by the insurer. The cities, counties, and state government will pay the cost of the benefit for their first responder employees. The estimated annual cost is about $133 per employee per year. And just to put that in perspective, that's less than the cost of one pair of boots that they wear every year. And that's an annual cost, not a monthly cost. ACCG, GMA support this bill, as well as the Police Chiefs Association, Fire Chiefs Association, the Firefighter Association, the Georgia Sheriff's Association, and the Fraternal Order of Police. That is the bill, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions, and I would ask for your favorable consideration. I appreciate the hearing.
Thank you. Questions of the author of the bill? Senator Robertson.
Yes, Representative Seabaugh, I want to thank you for bringing this forward. I've had a few supervisors and several good friends kill themselves, either while they were in law enforcement or immediately following their retirement from law enforcement. But the $3,000 in here, how do we track to make sure that that $3,000 is going to where it's supposed to go to?
Yep, good question. I brought my insurance specialist, John Hanson, with Lockton. He's kind of the architect behind the benefit, and if you don't mind, I'll let him answer that question.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. So the legislation, as well as the insurance product, does not specifically define how the lump sum benefit should be used. That's common with that type of benefit, which is called a critical illness or a lump sum benefit. So if you have a heart attack, it would pay you a fund that you could use for expenses. What I can speak to are the other programs that I've created, including the Georgia Firefighter Cancer Program, which has a $25,000 lump sum benefit. And from that program, which has been in place for more than 5 years now, there's been virtually no evidence of misuse of the funds provided. The $3,000 as well is, and as you know, this bill started at 10 and moved to 3, in large part was designed to be certain that those funds were sufficient, but not necessarily exorbitant, so they would necessarily be used for things outside of the treatment for the PTSD.
Yes, and follow up real quick, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
sir.
And you bring up a point. I know we had EAP programs and other programs through the Pastoral Institution there in Columbus and other places. How did we land on the number 3,000? That number seems a little low.
I can speak to it. I think that was structured negotiation.
Was there any type of, during these structured negotiations, any type of empirical data or actuarial information used to come up with that number?
Yeah.
And if so, how many cases of these officers claiming PTSD, legitimate PTSD? I have a copy of the DSM-5 on my desk at home, and I've seen this, the term PTSD be absolutely abused and assaulted in society today. Every time somebody watches a Freddy Krueger movie, they go to the doctor and claim they have PTSD. So I'm a little concerned about how it's being abused, but also I'd like to know that we're using real math to come up with these numbers.
So the study that's most frequently cited is a VA study that tracked the uninsured cost of like a PTSD treatment protocol. And those numbers run between 18 to 20,000, depending on whether you're in the military or civilian. The $10,000 was the starting point, which over the course of about a year and a half, working with, I would call a stakeholder group of upwards of 50 people, designing a product that essentially balanced the cost of the benefit against the benefits received. And recall, it's designed to supplement what they already have under their health insurance. We did not see, that committee did not see a reason to create a benefit at, say, $25,000. That was just not, that was not out of the picture, shouldn't have been done. But in order to find that sort of balance between the cost to the state and to the taxpayers versus a benefit a reasonable benefit that they could utilize, that's where we landed on 10,000. Now, one item here under the bill as well as the insurance product is cities and counties will have the opportunity to buy additional amounts if they choose to do so. So, and this is what I anticipate, if successful.
Let's
many
try to
cities and counties
be
will
as
choose
succinct as you
additional
can.
amount.
That's a lot of detail for a kind of a straightforward
I'll-
question.
I'm finished. Thank you, sir.
We're on a real tight timeline, I'm sorry.
No, that's right.
All right, so I have a question. Are we expecting these first responders what's to prevent them from filing a workers' comp claim? Are they gonna, if they have this, are they gonna not file a work comp claim, or are they gonna also file a work comp claim?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So this bill was originally put through the workers' comp board, and they decided that in order to file a workers' comp claim, you have to have a personal injury, an actual traumatic injury. So a mental health injury does not qualify for workers' comp, and that's the reason that we brought this benefit forward. So, for example, if you were on duty and you got shot and you had PTSD because of that, then you could file for a workers' comp claim. But if you're the partner that watched your partner get shot and you have PTSD because of that traumatic event, then you don't qualify for a workers' comp claim. And that's where this benefit would kick in.
But if you were shot and you file for a workers' comp claim and it's deemed to be compensable, and it's going to cover your PTSD also, are you still going to get this? I would think you're going to still get this benefit.
No, the lump sum benefit they would receive, the $3,000, the disability benefit would be reduced based on what they were receiving as a workers' comp benefit if they were successful.
So it's offset.
Yes, it's offset. And that
Is there language in the bill that says that?
Yes.
You don't know the line number by any chance, do you?
Don't, but we can find it.
Yeah, line 140 to 143. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Merritt, you have a question?
Yeah, just a clarification. We have heard this bill before, correct? I do recall some law enforcement officers coming in and testifying. Is there anything different from what we have previously heard, other than did we do it as workers' comp before and now this is just different? Is that correct?
Yeah, so this a similar bill, this is totally different, but a similar bill was dropped through the workers' comp route. That was before I was in office, so I can't speak to that.
No, it's okay. I just know this is very familiar. But thank you.
Yeah, so the cost of the workers' comp bill is like $450, $500, where the cost of this is $133.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to take one more question, and then we've got somebody signed up, and I'm going to give them a few minutes to speak. Senator Harbin.
Yes, sir. Mr. Hanson, I remember and worked on the bill that was dealing with workers' compensation versus long-term care or long-term disability, and the issue was the ability to determine whether it was work-related or whether it was just an accident issue that was outside of the workplace. My question here would be a couple of one. Number one, do you have any kind of support number or a help number that a individual could call from the standpoint? I know some of them have chaplains, some of the fire departments have chaplains. Is there any kind of formal place? I've got, in our community, we have a guy that does nothing but suicide type prevention.
Sure.
Is that something that's included? This is an insurance product that you're dealing with, am I correct?
That's correct.
So it's an insurance product, it's just really kind of an indemnity agreement. But my other part would be, is there even the ability to have a 1-800 number or somebody you can get help? That would seem to be something that would need to be, or could be looked at, just a thought.
No, I envision think of a website as a central site for anyone who has interest in learning more about it. And that site will include the national 800 numbers if a person needs to speak to someone. I would also reference the Office of Public Safety Support, which was created a few years ago, will work in conjunction with the work that we're doing here as well. And that organization provides those same sort of services, clinical services, discussion services. They also refer a first responder out for therapy if they need it.
After termination or retirement, will this plan be available to the employee to continue if they wanted to continue?
It extends for 2 years. So if there's a traumatic event witnessed on the job and then the person retires, they have upwards of 2 years from the date of the traumatic event to file for a benefit. So if a person were witnessed a traumatic event the day they retired, they would have 2 years to file under this program.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it, Representative.
All right.
We've got Ashley Wilson has signed up to speak to it, and she's with the Gwinnett County Police Department. Hey, Ashley.
Sir.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir. So, I appreciate your time, and I understand that we're really limited. I wanted to give you all a personal face to a lot of the facts and technical details that y'all heard today. And the example that Representative Seabaugh used of watching your partner get killed, he was really referencing my incident. On October 20th of 2018, my partner was shot 6 times as he walked up to the door to investigate a suspicious vehicle. I want to let you know there's actually nothing wrong with this vehicle. We were just going to tell him to move on and go about their day. But before Tony had time to shut his door, he was gunned down. I pulled his body to the side of the road. I rendered aid, which required tourniquets, chest seals, AED, and then I eventually started CPR on him when he stopped breathing. His last words were, "Wilson, I feel like I'm choking." He said he felt like he was choking, and then he stopped breathing. We did CPR on him all the way to the hospital. We continued with the valiant efforts from our fire department and our emergency room staff, but his wounds were just too severe. Afterwards, in the weeks that followed afterwards, I experienced debilitating flashbacks. I had nightmares. I could smell when there was a blood from like another uninvolved injury. It took me exactly back to what it was like watching my partner bleed out in front of me on the concrete of a middle school parking lot. All because somebody was worried about a car. We walked up to it with every intention of telling them to just move on. And they shot him 6 times. I watched him die in front of me, and those nightmares continued. I could function at work to some extent, but my colleagues and my supervisors noticed that the Ashley Wilson that existed on October 19th was not the Officer Wilson that existed after the shooting. I had to seek care, but because I was not injured in this incident, every penny had to come out of pocket. And despite the fact that I carry not one major insurance that's offered through my employer, but I also carry a second through my husband on TRICARE, that we still out of pocket paid $22,000 over the course of treatment for me in order to treat my diagnosed PTSD. What this bill does is it gives the hundreds of thousands of Georgia first responders who have experienced similar incidents, that are going through the exact same symptoms that I experienced. It gives them hope, and it gives them a starting point that they are not having to choose whether they're going to live or have a place to live. This bill is this important, and I know that it will save lives. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ashley. Any questions for Ashley? No questions, thank you. Chuck,
I have a chance to sign up. I've got about 30 seconds.
okay,
Chuck Clay, represent the chiefs of police. Here to say, it was said earlier, but want to reiterate, this is of critical importance. We certainly support it. You start somewhere. Senator Robinson asked why the number. You negotiate, you bargain. That's what we could come up with now. You all have the time and place to look whether it's working, what's more effective, does it need to be modified, more money, or other safeguards. Plenty of time to pass this now today. Everybody in law enforcement will appreciate it. Thanks, sir.
Chuck, let me ask you a question that may be not really in your wheelhouse, but, so we've passed legislation in the recent year or two to require parity, and the federal government's passed legislation too, I believe, parity for mental health disorders to be treated like any other health condition. In Ashley's case, why was this not covered? Is it because it's a self-insured plan that's governed under ERISA, or?
I'm not an expert, but it all depends on the policy and the coverage you have. Certainly mental health issues are considered now like any other issue, heart attack, broken leg, or anything else that might occur, assuming you're covered in that policy. In her
Maybe it's the
case,
timing. I think she said it was 2018. Okay. Thank you, Chuck.
Prior to.
Appreciate it.
Now. Thanks, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I do want to point out that most municipalities, like the one I work for, they hire risk managers there, that their primary goal is to pay as little money as possible and to fight against every workers' comp claim possible. And I'm very familiar with Ashley's situation, and I remember the day that she tried to save her partner's life. And every time she tried to explain the situation to him to the best she could, there were individuals lined up against her in order to prevent the payment of this. That is, rarely does someone who's paid to do this job, any first responder, if you can convince them to tell their agency that they're having issues, then the city is usually stacked hard against them and puts up a lot of obstacles that are almost insurmountable in explaining what PTSD is, because now it has become such an accepted excuse by so many people that wouldn't know what PTSD was if they ran over it in their car.
Thank you. All right, we appreciate the testimony, and we'll take this under consideration. Thank you, Representative, for bringing the bill. All right, next up, last on our agenda, HB 924. Hadn't heard much about this issue, but teasing. Chairman Ballinger, how are you today?
I'm very well. Good
Thank-
rules meeting that we had earlier, so I appreciate your moving the meeting.
Thank you for being with us to talk about this important issue.
Thank you.
And Representative Ballinger, just before we start, to lay the groundwork here, we've got 20 minutes.
Okay.
So that's going to be you can take all the 20 minutes if you
Okay.
want to, but we do have 1, 2, 3, 4 people signed up
Okay.
that are interested in weighing in on this. So
Okay. All right.
I'm
Well, I'll
not
try
rushing.
to.
I'm not rushing you. I mean, I think 20 minutes is you should be able to cover it, but whatever's left, we have to be out of here at 12:30.
I certainly understand, and certainly understand it's the season where you have to be 4 places at the same time. So I will just go quickly through the bill, and then I'll kind of go through kind of exactly what the bill does, kind of outside of the language, what it really means for somebody who, like myself, has battled cancer. I know Labor Commissioner Bruce Thompson has a former member of your austere body has recently been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So I know that y'all are very sympathetic to those needs of the cancer community. So I'll just kind of run through quickly what exactly the bill does. It kind of, we go through, we see all the definitions and that sort of thing. But basically what the bill does is it allows for cancer patients, I was one, and it allows for the doctor, if the doctor prescribes you medicine, to get it from your doctor. That's what the bill does. It prohibits a practice. It's called the white bagging bill. That, to me, that kind of smacks a little bit of cocaine or something illicit, which is not what the bill is at all. And if you know me from, judicial non-civil rules or judicial or juvenile justice. So, certainly not my wheelhouse, but that's basically what the bill does. It prohibits that practice, where the insurance company could step in and say, no, you can't get the medicine from your doctor. You have to get the medicine from this insurance, this medical, this pharmacy or that pharmacy. And a lot of times these are medicines that we're receiving via infusion. So I'm meant to take that medicine and then go to my doctor and get it infused without really knowing, there's just that disconnect between the medicine that's formulated for you and an actual infusion. And I think there's just a lot of risks that come into that, and it's risks for the patient. A lot of people say it's about the money. I say it's about where the money is going, is really at the crux of this issue. Obviously, the doctors, my oncologist came to me with this bill. I'm not a healthcare lobbyist. Healthcare is not my wheelhouse, but they knew, because of my previous experience and personal knowledge of cancer, that I knew really what was at risk and what the stakes were having to do with this issue. So they sweet talked me into carrying this bill, and that's basically what the bill does. It just gives the patient the right to get their treatment, get their medicine from their doctor, rather than have to go through an outside pharmacy. That's essentially what the bill does, and I'm happy to answer more specific questions for y'all, but really it's about patient safety.
So you're looking well. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing very well. Yeah,
That's-
that was several years ago.
That's
so.
awesome.
Yeah.
Give us an example of based on maybe your experience
Mhm.
or somebody else's experience,
Mhm.
what we're talking about here, a real life example of, you say get your medicine
Mhm.
from your doctor.
Uh-huh.
I think there's a pharmacist still involved,
There is.
and I think it's the location
Mhm.
really is part of it is the location where you get where it's coming from, either
Uh-huh.
in a hospital setting or a clinic setting, I suppose. So give us a real life.
A real life example of what happens now without this bill, without the influence of this bill. What happens now is that you go to the doctor pulls your blood. The doctor tests your blood for certain things, and certain things will be suppressed or amplified based on the medicine that you're taking. So there are different markers or different things that the doctor is looking for in your specific case in formulating basically the magic cocktail of medicines that you're getting. And cancer patients are never on one particular medicine. They're usually on several different medications. The strength will vary based on the blood work, based on the chemical composition of that blood. And the doctor kind of formulates whatever that magical composition is. And a lot of times the medicines too, there's medicines to ameliorate some of the downsides of that medicine as well. So there's kind of like the medicine in and of itself, the chemotherapy, if you will. And then there's the anti-nausea meds, or there's I was on a lot of, I took what they call a dose dense version of what they call the Red Devil. It was that bad. If they're calling your medicine the devil, that's probably a bad indication. And I had to be on a lot of medications to help me deal with the physical aspects and the medical detriments and the physical detriments of being on such a medicine. So there's kind of like that secondary band of medicines too that's also tied directly to that medicine that's kind of developed specifically for you. And then after you meet with your doctor, after she comes up and makes her notes and gets your blood work back, and she comes up with this magic formula, then you go into an infusion suite, which is attached to her office. Usually in my case, it was attached to her office, so I would just kind of toddle down the hall, and there I would get my infusion. And that was pretty much it. And then whenever I was finished, I would toddle on and finish up with my day. This bill, if this bill gets enacted, what would happen is I would go to my doctor. My doctor would prescribe some medicine. I would go home. They would send me the medicine maybe the day later, maybe the day after. They would either send the medicine to myself or a third infusion suite, wherever they wanted to send it to. They would send it somewhere else. I would then go again and get the medicine either infused or pick up the medicine and then go to my doctor's office and get it infused, or I would just get it infused at that third party center. So it breaks that connection that you have between patient, doctor. It breaks that connection that they have, and the doctor actually seeing, your blood work, your physical composition, how you're feeling, everything like that. And like I said, it's not just the medicine that you're receiving or the chemotherapy, so to speak. It's also all those kind of add-on medicines as well. So that's what happens now, and that's what the bill seeks to prevent, is that breaking of that relationship.
Okay. Yeah, so you're essentially taking a poison to kill the bad cells, and Red Devil, that must have been rough.
Yeah.
All right, Senator Merritt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you, Representative, for coming in. So you're suggesting that, the hospitals are charging more. They do charge more for the drugs that are administered.
They're under contract with the insurance companies, so they charge per the contract that the insurance companies have negotiated with the hospitals and the doctors.
Are you suggesting that, I guess, the higher price drug is better quality than a patient would get otherwise?
I'm not going to argue quality. I'm going to argue efficacy and that relationship that doctor has with that patient and the doctor's ability to prescribe specifically for that patient on that day. I've lost 10 pounds over the course of 36 hours. And so, your physical makeup, your physical self can change very drastically over the course of 24, 36 hours. Whenever you're able to get that medicine right there, just as your doctor prescribes, just as you are right now, that's a safety aspect as well.
Any other questions? Senator Robertson.
Thank you, Chair Ballinger. I appreciate you. I went through a little bit of that with both my parents at the John B. Amos Cancer Center in Senator Harbison's district. Now, I understand the primary concern in this is patient safety, and the hospitals. And to Senator Merritt's question, I think the average, the report I read, the average number of cost increase from the specialty pharmacy that the hospital has to purchase from is somewhere around 500% is the number I saw. And then I certainly hope the oncologist that's a good friend of mine doesn't practice in this, but I know that some oncologists receive probably about a 6% commission, and that is not the right word, for the medication they give because of the poison. And like you said, I saw my sweet mother on that poison.
Yeah.
Requires certain formularies and things to create. So do you feel that possibly what we have is that cancer patients are caught in between the profit silos of hospitals and physicians and pharmacies in some of this, and are kind of being left out of the conversation?
I think this is an effort to try to put the patient back into the conversation, and trying to speak to patient safety. I can only speak from a patient perspective. I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody else. I'm speaking on behalf of patients. Just like, with Senator Thompson going through his issues, you want them to get the very best, and you want them to get exactly what the doctor wanted them to get. Certain medications are influenced by a change in temperature. If they're not kept cold, if they're photosensitive, they're sensitive to light. So if they get exposed to light, then, their effectiveness goes down. There's a loss of efficacy there. There's just so many different things that can happen to that medicine whenever you break that relationship between physician, medicine, and patient.
Senator Harbin.
Yes, thank you. Depending upon what's going on, the doctor, as I understand, would be, he's the quarterback of your care from that standpoint, and he's the one that's making the decisions. The medical side, he can get the medicine himself through his office, and what you're saying, he has that offer. This would also enter into, I'm thinking, with high deductible plans, things of that nature out of pocket, is that if you're the patient, you should have the ability, if you're spending your money, if you are, to choose if the doctor can get that medication for less money than the hospital. It's costing, either way it's costing. As I understand this, is that the patient currently does not have a choice in the process of where it comes from. Am I correct?
Well, the patient just gets it wherever the doctor chooses.
Okay. But you're going to give this choice back to the patient, that he can take either the hospital or the doctor either way, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, the financial side of it, will he be able to know, and I guess that's my next question. I've looked at the EOBs and I'm sorry, if you can do Greek and Hebrew, you may can figure them out.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Right. But what I'm saying is that one of the things that's happened is we're no longer a part of our care and what's spent money-wise. We have no idea what it is. And sometimes we just throw our hands up and say, well, whatever. But I see this as that we should have a voice in what's going on. Because ultimately, we pay for it either now or we pay for it in the future from that standpoint. But this would give the patient the choice of either doctor or hospital, wherever he wants to go or he or she wants to go. Am I correct?
It would put the patient first. It puts the patient back in the driver's seat to be able to make that decision for themselves without dictating. So.
Like choice. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
We're going to hear from some folks in the industry now. I'm going to start off with Jesse Wetherington with the Georgia Association of Health Plans.
Mr. Chairman, I have a handout.
Yes, sir. There's also some material in your folder, committee members, from the Georgia Hospital Association and the Shepherd Center. Go ahead, Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good afternoon. My name is Jesse Wetherington. I'm the president of the Georgia Association of Health Plans, which represents the commercial health benefits industry in the state of Georgia. We have concerns with House Bill 924, so we appreciate the opportunity to share those with you today. I'll try to be as succinct as I can, Mr. Chairman. So indeed, this bill is really about money. And if you want to know why in the United States we spend on average twice as much per person on health care than every other industrialized country, I would submit House Bill 924 to you as a prime example. So the impact of this bill, if it will pass, is it will trap patients in the absolute most expensive care setting possible to obtain provider-administered drugs. So in each of these instances, you're having two pieces to the claim. There's the ingredient cost of the drug itself, and then there's the professional administration fee that individual receives for administering that drug to the patient in their infusion center, at the doctor's office, or at the hospital. As you'll see from the information that my colleague Mr. Riley has distributed to you, there's a very significant markup on these drugs when they are delivered in these settings versus being shipped to the facility or doctor's office via the process of white bagging. So the other side of that is what we call buy and bill, where the facility or the provider will have the agent on hand, and so they will dispense it when that patient comes in. the day of the treatment, but that is absolutely the most expensive way to do it, as you will see from some of these markups. On average, the cost per single dose is $8,200 higher in the hospital than if they're able to obtain that from the specialty pharmacy. For select drugs, I'll highlight a few more of you. Ocrevus, which is a drug to treat multiple sclerosis, the patient markup at that point would be $22,000 per dose. For Keytruda, which is a cancer drug, it's $10,000 a dose, and for Darzalex, which is another oncology drug, that's another approximately $10,000 per dose, or on average, 118% markup. If you don't want to take our word for it, the New England Journal of Medicine just published a study in January that shows that the average markup in a hospital for a provider-administered drug, again, those are the hospitals that are receiving 340B discounts to purchase that drug, are 300% on average. So, you can shop for groceries in a convenience store or the pharmacy, but that might be the most expensive place to do it. You can get your car repaired at the dealership, or you can go down the street to have a cheaper option if you so choose. We would ask for you all to reject House Bill 924 and preserve that option for Georgia patients. Briefly, Chairman, there's kind of several other reasons we'd want to highlight for our concerns, besides merely the increase in premiums and out-of-pocket spending for members that would be associated with this. This bill does not have an ERISA exemption written into it, which we typically see in state-regulated insurance bills. And it was the author's intent to cover as many people as possible, so we would be concerned that that would be a preemption issue at that point with ERISA plans. The bill includes the state health benefit plan and those members, so we would say that the State Health Benefit Plan Fiscal Note Act would require that there be a fiscal note for this. And again, I would think you would not want to pass a bill of this magnitude and pass on those cost increases to your teachers, school employees, and state employees around your districts without knowing what the impact would be. Again, the one reason why this is not necessary is that the Department of Insurance, working with our industry a couple of years ago, put out a directive to prohibit the practice of white bagging in rural critical access hospitals or any hospital that qualifies for the rural hospital tax credit. Those facilities are the ones that really do struggle. They're true safety nets and vital lines of, for healthcare for their communities, and so those do need to be protected. What this bill really does is it allows big, consolidated urban systems to continue to profit very heavily off of these drugs for the patients that are up there. And one thing I would finally add is that, you'll probably hear a little bit about PBMs and rebates. This falls on the medical side of the benefit most of the time because it's administered by a professional. And so the PBM and rebate issue is really not relevant to this. This is really just about these drugs for these kind of conditions that are administered by professionals in either the facility or office setting. So for those reasons, Mr. Chairman, we have some grave issues with this, and we would urge the committee to reject the bill.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
Jesse, I looked at the handout y'all gave us, and it's $8,200 cost per single treatment for drugs administered in hospitals. Okay, well, a lot of these drugs are administered outpatient.
Right.
Is there a cost difference there?
Yes, so the second bar is in the physician's office. So you'll see those are far less dramatic increases. They still...
The second bar here?
Yes, sir. There are markups there. They are just not as eye-wateringly high as the ones you would see in the hospital.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next, Abigail Thompson with the Shepherd Center.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Abigail Thompson, and I'm Director of Government Relations and Advocacy for the Shepherd Center. We want to thank Representative Mandy Ballinger for bringing this bill. It's very important to Shepherd Center, and we support House Bill 924. So we support this bill because we feel that this is about patient choice, patient safety, and provider autonomy. So at Shepherd, we are a catastrophic injury hospital, so we specialize in the treatment and rehabilitation of spinal cord injuries, brain injuries, neuromuscular conditions, as well as the treatment of multiple sclerosis. So we administer physician-administered drugs at our outpatient clinic to treat MS. And so on a very regular basis, we see where we are being forced to procure these drugs from the insurer's preferred pharmacy. And oftentimes we are not getting the compounds back in time for the patient's scheduled appointment. Another, which causes a delay in their treatment, and that can have adverse consequences to their health. Another issue that was raised earlier by Representative Ballinger is if the patient comes in and then there's blood work and we need to do a modification to the dosage from the physician, they're unable to do so since the drugs were procured outside of our chain of command. You've heard a lot about the price of these drugs, and the really important distinction is that this only impacts in-network agreements. So you're not going to be, this is whatever the price is that is agreed upon with the provider and the insurer, that's been negotiated at the table. So another important thing to consider is this is not preventing white bagging. If that works for the provider and the insurer who have made an agreement and that's what's decided on, you can continue to do white bagging. This allows an alternative and an option when it exists and when it's in the best interest of the patient as well as the physician. You are dealing with the most expensive drugs. These are the most expensive drugs that usually account for 50% of the high cost of drugs in the U.S. So there's no doubt about that. But again, providers are not able just to slap some price on there that we want to be reimbursed from the insurer on. These prices and the reimbursement is agreed upon and negotiated with the insurer and the provider as it only relates to in-network agreements. So this is frankly a conservative approach to white bagging. So again, this is for us about patient choice and safety. This bill's been heard a couple of years now, so we just appreciate y'all's consideration. I know it's hearing only, but we would certainly ask for your favorable passage of this bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
No questions. Thank you, Abigail.
Thank you.
Next, Anna Adams from the Georgia Hospital Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I'm Anna Adams with the Georgia Hospital Association, and we represent more than 140 hospitals in the state of Georgia, small rural all the way up to large urban. I'm here today to represent the patients that our hospitals serve, and you heard earlier that this bill would create a situation where patients are trapped. I would argue the alternative, that patients are trapped now. In forced white bagging situations, patients don't have an option when it comes to where their medications are coming from. Regardless of whether they're administered in a hospital setting or a clinical setting. And that is something that we feel very strongly patients should be involved in that conversation. The one thing about this bill that I want to ensure that everyone understands is that this bill only applies to in-network providers, meaning you have a contract negotiation with an insurance company where on the front end you've determined how much the insurer will reimburse you for certain services, specifically for these very expensive IV drug medications. And so when we talk about cost markup, we're not talking about what the insurance provider is reimbursing the healthcare provider. We're talking about charges. And those charges are often inflated because we are trying to pay the pharmacist, we're paying the pharmacy techs, we're paying for the upkeep of these medications, which are often highly unstable. And the highly unstable aspect of these drugs is the reason why many providers prefer to not have a white bagging policy in place. When you can't verify that a temperature has been maintained, or that they've been kept in a space that is going to preserve the efficacy of the medication. Sometimes when you administer it, you have concerns about liability. You have concerns about whether that medication is going to work. And we want to make sure that our patients feel comfortable with the medications that are being infused on site. Now, nothing in this bill prohibits a situation where a patient might say, you know what, it's cheaper for me to do it through my insurance company and use white bagging. I would rather do that. That's absolutely allowed in this legislation. What it stops is if you already have a network agreement from an insurer and they come back after the fact and say, you don't get to use your pharmacy anymore, we want to force you to use ours, once the ink is dry on the contract. So on the front end, if you want to do white bagging and that's what works best in your contract agreement, that's allowed under this legislation. This just preserves that option for the patient. I'm happy to answer.
To that point, Anna, and you and I talked about this already. So the provider, the hospital in your case, has a contract with the health insurance company, and you're saying that they are not abiding by the contract, or they're changing the terms unilaterally after the contract is signed. And I asked you, why are they not then, going to court or enforcing the contract? And you said they didn't want to have an adversarial relationship with the health insurance carrier and maybe be eventually dropped down the road or whatever. But I mean, it's just weird to me that there's already an agreement in place. It seems like a contract dispute issue more than a legislative issue to me. And as powerful as your organization is, I would think you all would advocate for your members and enforce these contracts. So that's my question in a way.
I appreciate that. You know, there have been versions of this bill in the past that have dealt with unilateral contract changes outside of the pharmacy setting, because it doesn't just happen for pharmacy. It happens for lab. It happens for imaging. When you're a network, you're a network. But often those contracts contain a provision that the insurers have the ability to come back and make network changes after the fact. And we don't have to agree to that. And nobody has to sign off on that. It's just something that's included in order for the contract to exist in the first place. And so we're a little bit beholden to that if we want to have a contract at all. And so you often hear situations where hospitals are unable to reach negotiations with insurance companies. It's very rarely about the reimbursement rate. It's often over things like this.
Thank you. All right, last, to wrap us up, Cash Trivedi.
I know you're excited, Senator Robertson.
You got 3 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is Cash Trivedi with PCMA, the Pharmaceutical Care Management Association, which is the national trade association for the pharmacy benefit managers. Jesse touched on most of what I would have said. The only thing I want to add is we talk about the safety concerns. 99.98% of the time, these drugs are delivered accurately with 0 errors and administered 99.9% of the time with 0 errors. If something changes on the day of, then we have a buy and bill model with the hospitals. And that's all I have.
30 seconds, that's good. Yes.
Of course.
Cash, I want to be clear on the buy and what would you call it?
Buy and bill.
Yeah, the buy and bill. That basically means that if there's an issue with the white bag, then you pay the hospital the price for whatever their script costs, and the process is handled right there, right?
I believe so. Jesse's probably more.
The buy and bill is you're purchasing it from the local pharmacy right there on spot.
The hospital pharmacy.
Yeah, so the problem's solved. If it fills that gap, if there is a fracture between the out or the specialty pharmacy and getting it to the patient on time, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. That concludes our hearing on HB 924. Any other business to come before the committee? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.